Back to Europe we go, home of video editors that are actually very good indeed. Please, Terry, my lovely European video editor, don't edit me to look silly, for another raft of top-quality Eurogames. Games of using very clever plans to solve a puzzle without random elements with maximum efficiency. As ever, if you want to know more about Eurogames as a genre, and you should, they're easily the most dominant form of, quotes, proper board games in the hobby, and knowing about these games in particular will almost certainly get you access to the most elite board gaming clubhouses, check out Laurie's fantastic Eurogames Explained video. All of these games are medium to heavyweight, meaning there's a whole bunch of rules and mechanics to get through, and the collection starter has always been designed as a brief overview of games in order to get across the central gimmick of each one to make it easy for viewers to see which games generally excite them. So while I won't be able to cover every aspect of some of these thick and juicy games, if any of these descriptions do spark your interest, I recommend an amazing channel called Watch It Played if you want to know exactly how to play all of these step by step. We've covered some fantastic heavier Euros in past lists like Alchemist, Wingspan, and Robinson Crusoe, so just for the sake of an all-new list, we're putting those as honourable mentions. This is a collection starter, and here are the 10 best Euro games for experienced gamers. Number 10, Viticulture. Do you like wine? I like wine. I've got some wine over... Oh, fuck. Viticulture is a worker placement game at heart, similar in style to Stone Age. You have a bunch of vineyard workers, and you can tell they're fancy because of their hats. Fancy hats, these. While Stone Age was a worker placement game at its most basic, Viticulture mixes things up by dividing each round into summer and winter phases. Workers can only put in yellow spaces in summer and blue in winter, and you don't get fresh workers between the seasons, so you have to be very careful how you distribute your helpers. Also, unlike Stone Age, multiple players can occupy spaces at the same time, reducing your ability to screw with other players, though the first to put their work down will get a bonus. But you can also get bonuses by starting your turn after other players, so that's another little dilemma there. Juicy as a Cabernet grape popping under the soles of a news reporter's foot. The rest of the game sees you planting vines, giving tours, training new workers, selling grapes, converting grapes to wine, selling wine, and building extra structures to upgrade certain actions. A little wine-making engine building up and up until you're producing as much red wine as the elevators in The Shining. All the actions make sense within the theme, so it's not insanely hard to teach. Number 9, Tzolk'in the Mayan calendar. This game's a flashy little show-off, and I respect it. The game board is a series of interlocking gears, and every go you'll be turning the central daddy gear, which turns all the other smaller ones around it. That's just fun to do. It's another worker placement game with each of the smaller gears doing different things, harvesting resources, upgrading technology, worshipping gods with crystal skulls. Indiana Jones would approve. But the twist that makes Tzolk'in so unique is that when you place a worker on a gear, you place it at the gear's lowest available point, and every round that gear will turn, advancing you up the track of rewards. But you only get the reward when you remove your worker from the gear, which gives you a fascinating little problem to deal with. Do you leave your worker there for multiple rounds, essentially doing nothing, waiting for a big payoff, or do you get lots of little rewards, and often? Also, this game has a little way of messing with other players. Placing a worker in one space allows you to twist the central gear twice at the end of a round, not once, which can cause some players to overshoot their desired reward, which will cost them a few more resources to claim. It's not a plan breaker, but it's a nice cheeky f*** you to keep a unique game design a little extra spicy. Number 8, Scythe. Make way for the big boy. Scythe was a big, important Kickstarter a few years back because it featured lush artwork and very nice minis, some of which are mechs, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you raise nearly $2 million on Kickstarter. Nerd alert! Despite the map and minis making it look like an American-style combat game, Scythe is predominantly a Euro, where winning the game is based on completing multiple in-game goals, like having a certain amount of power, having 4 mechs on the board, being the most popular with the locals. You can fight in the game using a fun bluffing and negotiation mechanic that sees you either spend power that you need to complete a goal to beat an opponent, or more fun, try and bribe your way out of combat. But instead, the mechs are actually way more beneficial as basically just huge buses, moving your workers around the board, and instead you can and probably should focus on typical Euro game fare, upgrading your player boards, completing objectives, building your structures on the map, and producing resources. It's a more thematic Euro than normal, introducing some encounter cards with gorgeous artwork that add a little bit of narrative to the game. Scythe has remained hugely popular because it gives players lots of choices. There are loads of objectives to complete, so depending on how fighty or puzzly you're feeling, there'll be something fun for you to focus on. Number 7, Great Western Trail. Yeehaw! A game of 60% rooting, 35% tooting, and 5% being a no-good cowboy sumbitch. Okay, actually adjust those expectations. If you're looking for bank robbing, gunfights, and prospecting, Western Legends is the game for you. Great Western Trail is all about cattle farming. No, please come back. In the game, you move your worker along this track towards Kansas City Market, acquiring cows as they go, which you'll add to your hand. See, Great Western Trail is also a deck builder. So each go, you want to be adding as many primo cows as you can afford to your deck, and look at these primo cows. Great cows. But also cycling through that deck, so the cows are actually in your hand by the time you reach the market. Everything else you do upgrades this basic process. You can add buildings to this map, which lets you buy more cows, cycle cards, move your cattle train to sell at more markets to get more points, but also crowding up this trail gives you more opportunities to rest and do stuff, whilst also earning money if other players are forced to stop at your buildings. Hand it over, you damn varmint. It's a complicated game. There is a ton of different bonuses to work towards, and just looking at these symbols gives you a headache, but for how the game board changes every single round, the more buildings go down, every single turn is super different, and it's a dazzlingly clever puzzle to unpack. Number 6. Castles of Burgundy. Even heavy Euros need a little dice sometimes. I know, blasphemy. Burn him! But hear me out. Castles of Burgundy uses these dice in a fantastic way. You're trying to build a kingdom of tiles on your little player board. Each tile will help you out when you add it to your map. Some lets you build sets of animals or get a load of goods to sell, give you extra money, gain more tiles. These things can ping off each other, creating nice mini combos that are super satisfying. However, on your turn, you can only do 2 things, and you have to spend one of your 2 dice to do each one. You can spend a die to grab a tile from the area that matches the value of the dice. You can play a tile that you've already grabbed onto your board in a space that also matches the value of the dice, but you can't put identical tiles next to each other. You can sell goods that again have to match the value of the die. You can also spend workers to ever so slightly adjust the values of those dice, so it's not crazy restricting, but depending on which kind of player you are, this system of having to match these dice values can actually be, yes, limiting, but also really freeing. For example, I'm thick, and in a lot of Eurogames, the huge expanse of options I can take renders me a very handsome and funny deer in headlights, caught in a state of analysis paralysis. Castles of Burgundy limits my options, which makes choosing the best option left a lot easier. Thanks, Castles of Burgundy. You stay classy. Number 5, Terraforming Mars. Very popular game this. After all, who doesn't like terraforming? I know I do. Look at that. Terraforming Mars combines set collection, resource gathering, area control, lots of different Euro mechanics wrapped in one super cool theme that actually has quite a lot of basis in hard science, which is certifiably neat. Over a number of generations, you'll be working to raise Mars' temperature, oxygen levels, add water and greenery, all to make it habitable for us to move in and f*** it up just like we f*** up Earth. Hooray for backup planets. This is your playboard, which is your engine for the game. You'll raise the levels on things like plant production, power, wealth, so that you produce more of those things to play more cards, which you use to get more things. Eurogame bingo, everyone! You'll also be playing tiles on the surface of Mars, which will give you endgame points, chasing milestones, which gives you more points if you get there first, but the real fun in the game lies in these cards. You can collect huge sets of these, all with science graphics on them outlining various events, terraforming tools, gizmos, vegetation, fun science. Some even let you mess with your opponents, which is cheeky science. It's a fun theme to just tinker around in, and super satisfying once you get ahead of steam going. Number 4, Brass Birmingham, aka Peaky Blinders the board game, except if the Peaky Blinders gave up on crime and became super interested in canal boats and trains. Cho. In Brass, you'll be playing literally a game of 2 halves, the canal phase, then the rail phase. During each round of each phase, you'll be playing some of your cards to do things. Things like putting down buildings on the map, or putting down transport tiles to link up towns into one long network. At the end of each phase, you'll want your buildings to be flipped over so they can score you points, and you can flip these buildings over by connecting one unbroken link from that tile to a corresponding merchant, or in the case of certain things like coal works or iron works or breweries, when all the goods placed on that tile have been spent. Now that's a tiny amount of the lots and lots of rules that go into Brass Birmingham, but it's enough for me to get over the key selling point of the game, which is that it's communal. See, a line from goods to merchant counts as a line as long as anyone's transport tiles link it up, not just mine. Similarly to build or sell stuff on their turns, other players might be using my coal or my iron or my beer. Maybe they use it all up and that flips my tile over, immediately giving me money and making it ready to score at the end of the phase. Ta very much. Plans in brass are harder to accomplish than a Birmingham accent that doesn't slip into South African, which makes it super freeing when you can use your opponent's turns as stepping stones to get what you want. Number 3, Food Chain Magnate. This game is mean. Most Eurogames are a little passive-aggressive, taking a thing before your opponent, resulting in mild tutting. In Food Chain Magnate, your opponent can build an elaborate plan, set it in motion, only for you to swoop in and hoover up all the points, resulted in a mild repeated blows to the face and neck. In Food Chain Magnate, you are building a fast food empire, serving various households on this rather ugly but functional map. You need to train staff, to hire more staff, to hire staff to make food, to sell food, to make money, spend money to pay staff. So far, so Eurogames, building an engine that runs on itself in a very tight and unforgiving system. But what makes Food Chain special is the methods by which you get customers through your doors. See, making the burgers isn't enough to sell them. You also have to advertise in the area to make people hungry for burgers. But the problem is, that doesn't make people hungry for your burgers, just burgers in general, and customers will go wherever's closest or cheapest. So if your opponent also makes burgers and lowers their prices, all the people that you got whipped up in a burger frenzy will walk past your restaurant and buy burgers from the cheap place, leaving you with spoiled meat, spoiled dreams, and a throbbing vein in your forehead. It's a mathy little game working out pricing, distance customers have to travel, but it's one of the most intense gaming experiences I've ever had, and not for the short-tempered, which I am. Number 2, Concordia. A much more gentle game, and also one of the best balanced games on this list in terms of being easy enough to wrap your brain around, but complex enough to reward careful planning. In Concordia, you're traders in ancient Rome. On your turn, you can do one thing, nice and simple, which is playing a card from your hand. You start with 7 cards, each card does a different thing. You can move workers and build buildings, you can produce goods, trade goods for cash, buy more action cards. Some powers ping off other players, like if you have a building in a region that another player activates to produce goods, that's some free goods for you. Hooray! Or you can use the diplomat card to basically reuse the action that someone else has just played, even if you don't have that specific action card in your hand anymore. Hooray! Every card you play goes to your own private discard pile, where it can't be played again until you play the card that brings them all back into your hand. Like, that's it. Really? Move around the board, building, making a bigger deck of cards to let you do more of certain actions before you run out and need to replenish your hand, and also collecting sets of cards for endgame bonuses, meaning you can be lagging behind all game but still clean up when it counts. The turns are fast because you're only doing one thing each time, and the cards are super clear to help you along. It's a really pleasant experience because the strength of the actions on these cards means pretty much every go, you're guaranteed to be able to do something at least a little bit useful, and maybe even useful for your neighbor. And that makes for a calmer, jollier time. And is there a period of history more famously calm and jolly than ancient Rome? Wait, what's that about lions? And number 1, Puerto Rico. Speaking of nice, a relatively ancient game in the hobby, Puerto Rico came out in 2002. I know, right? Get off the road, Grandpa. And every turn, you'll do one thing. You'll take a tile named after a certain role in the community: builder, mayor, captain. And sure, only one person can do each action type each turn, and that's bad. But when a player does that action, everyone around the table gets a chance to do it too, right then and there, which is great. It's super interactive. Sure, the player who actually chose the action tile will get a small bonus, but it means each round players will get to do a whole bunch of different useful things: buying buildings, adding plantations, adding new workers to the map, producing goods, loading up ships with a certain type of good. It's a production game where your neighbors are inadvertently speeding along your own plans with their choices. That feels good, or, bad, depending on how much you hate your friends. And boy, do I hate my friends. Look at these guys. No thanks. It's the perfect mix of clever planning, social interaction, and good fortune. And now each game on this list will satisfy a different sweet spot for different people, whether you like your games calm, mean, open-ended, very restrictive. But for my own personal tastes, the mechanics of sharing actions in Puerto Rico makes for both a deep puzzle to unpick, but also a table that's rowdy in a friendly way. Players sarcastically thanking each other for helping them out on their road to ultimate European glory. Although, not European because Puerto Rico, but it's a Euro game, which is why I said... Never mind. And that's our list. What's your favourite heavyish Euro game? Let us know in the comments. If you like the video, you could click that little thumbs up or the subscribe button. That really helps us out. And share us with your friends to help them get on board.